Yeah. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 7 p.m. and city clerk to read the statement of compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act into the record.
This meeting is being held in compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, with the meeting notice sent to the Hunterdon County Democrat, the Trenton Times, and the listserv on May 15th, 24, and notice to the members of the public was provided through Lambertville Matters. This meeting is being streamed live and is being recorded using the Zoom meeting platform. Roll call.
Yes, please.
Councilwoman Kaminsky. Here. Councilman Lodge.
Here.
Councilman Stegman.
Here.
Council President Lambert. Here. Mayor No.
Here. All right, well, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll remain standing for a moment of silence and appreciation of everybody who's ever served on a jury. So, a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for one nation, under God, indivisible, and with Thank you. Please be seated. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight. I appreciate everyone being here and being a part of this meeting. And tonight we are here to discuss the Lambertville High School redevelopment area. We decided to add this meeting specifically for the public to ask questions. We have all of our professionals here. I'll introduce them all in a moment. But we wanted to make sure that there was plenty of time between the introduction of the ordinance and the second reading public hearing for all of you to come and ask questions and share your views. So yeah, this is meant to be just pretty much an informational meeting. The documents have been posted to the city website. And I've noted in Lambertville Matters today with the link right on the landing page, you'll find all the documents. These include the proposed ordinance, the proposed redevelopment plan, timeline of the development history, the project narrative from Kay Hovnanian, and 2 engineering memos. Let's start by introducing everybody on the dais this evening. We'll start with Michael Sullivan, raise your hand. Michael, city planner. We have Elaine next time, also with Clark and Hens helping us out with affordable housing questions. Bill Ogle, the city attorney and the redevelopment attorney. D'Agostino, the city engineer. Joseph Lipanovsky from Kay Hovnanian Homes. And here in the audience, we have Brett Skapinitz from Dynamic Engineering, who's going to be helping us with some of the plans here. Basically, the way this meeting I'd like it to go is I'm going to speak for a few minutes and then really turn it over to our professionals. Michael will walk us through a bit of history regarding the Lambertville High School redevelopment area and plan, as well as our fair share affordable housing requirements. I'm going to ask Bill to describe, just the broad outline of the redevelopment process and a general timeline for how things go. Joseph will share information about Kay Hovnanian's proposed plan. Doug will speak to stormwater management regulations and anything else that comes up from the city engineering standpoint. After which we're going to open this up to the public for questions. Some new faces here. It's really always great to see people come and participate in these meetings. I do want to go through explain a few things about how we run our public meetings here. The city ordinance allows for each speaker to have 3 minutes of uninterrupted time for public comment. And in fairness to all speakers, this will be uniformly applied without exception. Cindy will keep track of the time and we'll give you a 30-second warning when you've got 30 seconds for your name. I would ask that you take a minute to silence your cell phones. I would remind people that we would appreciate no side conversations. As my 4th grade teacher used to say, you're not learning anything when you're talking. So if you want to talk, please step out into the lobby and have a conversation there. But really, there should just be one person speaking in the room at a time. That's important to me. Decorum is important. I think that decorum is how we offer respect for differing views, and it's also how we offer respect for the work of your governing body and its professionals. So I'm a little bit of a stickler about that kind of thing, so keep an eye out on it, and I'll do my best to run a nice smooth meeting and answer everybody's questions and make sure that everybody's voice is heard. The meeting will end by 9 o'clock. Can I just get a show of hands roughly about how many people wish to speak, just so I have an idea of what we're, and I'm not holding anybody to this. I just wanted to kind of get a sense in the room. Thank you. And Cindy, how many people do we have online?
22.
Okay, 22, that's a good number. Also take a moment to introduce the council for those of you who are unfamiliar with some of them. We have Council President Lambert, Councilwoman Kaminsky, Councilman Lyde, and Councilman Stegman, and the brains of the operation over there at the far end, Cindy Iggy, who is really the person behind the screen, right? So thanks, everybody. So just a couple of things for me before I turn this over to the professionals. So as everybody knows, I've been mayor for just about 2.5 years now. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about this through my perspective and my experience. So just before I was sworn in December 16th to be exact, a couple of weeks before I was sworn in, the governing body voted to table ordinance number 29-2021. That was to approve the Calian pilot agreement for the redevelopment of the police station site. So I was sworn in on January 4th, and 2 days later, I had my first call with the judge and Fair Share Housing. And it was felt like a momentous call, and I was pretty nervous, to tell you the truth. And the first question we talked about was the police station site and what kind of happened there. The second question is what's happening with Academy Hill. So from that first call, 2 days after I was sworn in, I've met with the judge and Fair Share 15 times. I've got all the dates right here. I explained the dates. I went through them at our last meeting, and won't do that again. Over the course of the 2.5 years of meeting with the judge, there's been, and Fair Share, there's been a lot of conversation about this particular site and the development, the redevelopment of it. In March of 2022, with my first email, March 4th, from Kay Hovnanian about potential opportunities to work together. And we had our first in-person meeting on March 25th of 2022. So it's going back more than 2 years long. Just to give you a sense of the magnitude of how much work has happened to get us to this point, which is really in many ways kind of a starting point, right? There have been 152 email chains. Many of those have a dozen or more emails only. So there's been scores and scores of emails. The council has met in closed session 3 times in 2022, 7 times in 2023, and 2 times in 2024 in regard to this matter. So there's been a lot of conversation. There's been 4 or 5 different plans that have been submitted. Really a tremendous amount of thought and hard work has gone into getting that to this point of beginning. And just lastly, I'll note that in August 17th of 2022, the former governing body adopted resolution 159-2022, which designated Kay Hovnanian the conditional redeveloper of Lambertville High School redevelopment area. And that's a designation that we have just continued with until now. So that's just a little bit of background from my my perspective. And what I'd like to do now is really just kind of turn this over to the professionals to each sort of speak to their respective parts of this, and then we'll open it up for questions. So I'm gonna ask Michael to start first and give us a little history about the background and also the affordable housing components.
Sure. For the record, I'm Michael Sullivan. I'm a principal of Clark Caton's planning, architecture, and landscape architecture firm in Trenton, and we are acting as a city planning consultant. I'm going to go through some history. Then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how this plan fits into the overall housing plan for Lambertville. Talk about the difference between the 2020 adopted redevelopment plan. And then I'll explain a little bit about why it's important in this context. So bear with me.
Can everyone hear?
No.
Oh, no?
Okay. Does this need to be closer?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Better? Try it. So redevelopment of Lambertville High School site is a long-term proposition. It's been in the context of Lambertville's affordable housing plan since 2015. And it began in that context because of the 2015 Supreme Court decision, the New Jersey Supreme Court decision, or Mount Walk 4 decision. And that decision, as a reminder, basically ruled that COA, Council on Affordable Housing, is dysfunctional and no longer function, and shifted the enforcement of each municipality constitutional obligation to provide the ability for affordable housing to the courts. It's a big shift. In response to that, in 2015, the city filed a declaratory judgment action seeking immunity from the courts until such time as they could prepare a plan that would comply with the mandate. After that happened, in 2015, the city designated this site as a redevelopment area because it was one of the larger, more vacant properties where you could accommodate affordable housing, and they did that for the purposes of planning housing to satisfy their constitutional obligation. In 2018, the city had their first settlement agreement with court-approved settlement with Fair Share Housing Center that said, yes, this is a good plan. You have a sketch plan for how you're going to do this. Now go forward and develop your housing plan. In that settlement, it required Lambertville High School site to produce 67 market rate townhouses, 44 market rate apartments, and no less than 28 affordable apartments for a total of 139 dwelling units. So that's in 2018. In 2018, in order to facilitate this, the city redesignated the high school site as a condemnation area, redevelopment area. And that means that the power of eminent domain could be used by the city if necessary. And it was done to try to make it a more feasible opportunity for affordable housing. In 2018, the city adopted the 2018 housing plan, element fair share plan, which included the Lambertville High School site with all of the units that we talked about before. In 2018, the city then adopted the redevelopment plan for the high school site, which had the same unit count that it had in 2015 and with 2018 in the settlement agreements. In 2019, the owners of the property filed litigation against the adoption of the development plan. And so there was negotiations. And then in 2020, the city came to an agreement with the owner and with the court, and there was an amended settlement agreement. And the terms of that amended settlement agreement, 2020, required that the condemnation power be removed from the site. And so the city did that, and they adopted an amended 2020 housing plan element and fair share plan. The 2020 housing plan element fair share plan maintained the same unit count on the high school site. From 2020 to 2022, the city began trying to work and find a developer who would develop this property consistent with the yield count for residential units that were envisioned in the housing plan and in the settlement plan. There were several that were in the running, but ultimately in 2022, K. Hovnanian was the developer that they settled on. That began a period between 2022 and 2024, where we are today, of working with K. Hovnanian to understand how they could develop a site, what the impediments to development were, and what the density and the unit counts needed to be, so that we could go back and amend the redevelopment plan if necessary to accommodate. And that's exactly what happened. And K. Hovnanian worked through the problems and opportunities of developing on the site. They prepared concept plans. These concept plans were reviewed and commented on, and there was back and forth. But ultimately, the city agreed to a certain concept plan, and those concept plans were used to develop the standards that are in this plan today. And so in 2024, on May 16th, the amended plan differ from the old development plan? Well, I said there's an increase in units. Okay, the original 2020 redevelopment plan had 139 total dwelling units with 28 affordable units. This 2024 plan allows up to 200 dwelling units and allows for it allows for stacked townhouses, which were not allowed before, but it also mandates the provision of a production of 40 affordable housing units. So it's an increase. This plan is different because it contains realistic conceptual site plans that have been, in a sense, pre-engineered with knowledge of survey, knowledge of site conditions that were not utilized in the 2020 plan. So it's more detailed in terms of its understanding and analysis, and what's required on the site by the redevelopment plan. In those conceptual site plans, also in the plan as a guide to the planning board, because the redevelopment plan requires substantial consistency with these plans. There's going to be no surprises when this comes to the planning board, and that's important. It mandates the creation of conservation areas, which the previous plan did not do. Anything that's not being disturbed is going to be required to be in a conservation easement. There's a requirement for monumentation. There's a requirement that there be adequate posting of signs facing inward towards the development to make sure there's no incursions from the homes that are ultimately built there. So you don't have people putting trampolines and wood piles in the conservation areas. It anticipates an appropriate location for potable water infrastructure, if necessary, to be located on site rather than on a public site within the site development framework. It also contains realistic architectural precedents for each of the unit types that are proposed and permitted in here, so that, and those were worked out by the city and massaged so that there's an understanding of what the buildings will look like. Rather than having very detailed architectural standards, there are architectural standards in there, but rather than having detailed architectural standards and not knowing what you're going to get, you're going to see what you're going to get, and the requirement is that the building be substantially consistent with these. The next thing I want to talk about is how does it fit within the core housing plan settlement? Well, the number of units that the municipality that he's responsible for is 137 units within the third round, which is, we're just about to end the third round now. Of those, 88 units need to be actually provided as physical units. In the 2020 fair share plan, we had 28 affordable units here with 22 bonus credits for a total of 50 credits towards our need for units of 88. This plan increases that so that we now are providing 65 credits from the site, and it will also allow us to generate credits that we couldn't get from other development. So it's an increase, but it's an increase and it's beneficial to the production of affordable housing in the town, and it's consistent with the settlement and the plan. It maximizes the minimum, it maximizes the bonus credits, and it meets the minimum rental units, the minimum family rental units, the minimum family units, and maximum, it maxes out the age restricted credits that we are eligible for without getting into too much detail. And why is it important to get this plan adopted? Lambertville has had immunity from litigation since 2015, which is almost 10 years. This round is ending in 2025. The current redevelopment plan has not resulted in a developer to build this project. And we were lucky to find a developer who was willing to explore that and come to Lambertville and to this site. This is the last remaining compliance mechanism that has not been finalized in our settlement. And it must be in place in order to receive the final judgment on repose, which we have a hearing scheduled in October, which we want to meet. The JOR, the judgment on repose, once received, will protect the city from building remedy lawsuits, which can be very disruptive. It's where nobody knows what building remedy lawsuit is. It's when you don't have immunity and the developer comes in and says, I can provide affordable housing and you're going to do it, and here's how much I need to do it. And it may be very discordant in terms of the context within which it is. Also, you lose some control of your zoning in that respect. So that's not. This site, as I said before, represents the largest number of units in any one compliance mechanism for the third round plan. And And if we were to lose the site and multiple units, it would put the city at great risk in terms of their control over land use, control over zoning and litigation. And so this site is critical to protecting city, immunity, and from litigation and from unplanned development and the loss of zoning control. So, hopefully that gives you a history, why it's different now, of what the importance of this. So, that's it.
Thank you, Michael. That was enough. All right, I'm gonna ask Bill to take over now for a few minutes. Walk us through this.
So this proposed project is proceeding under the local redevelopment law in New Jersey, which sets forth a number of guidelines that allows a municipality to work with a redeveloper to redevelop a blighted area. Back in 2015, as Michael stated, then council recommended the planning board that the 16 lots that comprise this property be studied to see whether they meet the statutory criteria for destination as area redevelopment. Back then, the planning board conducted a hearing and found that, after reviewing the study by the planner, found that the statutory criteria. Later on, after that planning board hearing, recommending that the property be delegated to the density council, designated an area to redevelop. There has been prior version of this redevelopment plan in place. It's been amended once already. This current pending ordinance that was introduced on May 16th is the second amendment that's been prepared in connection with the proposed redevelopment of the site. If this redevelopment plan as it exists right now, it'll be reviewed by the planning board to determine whether it's consistent with the city's master plan. If it's consistent, it will come back to the council on June 20th. There will be a public hearing on the ordinance that will allow the adoption of the plan. One of the important things that Michael said was that the redevelopment law is a tool that allows the city to maintain control over the redevelopment process. And that's exactly what's going on in this redevelopment plan. This is really a collaborative effort, but it's within the city's purview to approve it or not. And it really sets the zoning pretty well for what the city wanted to see at this site. If the redevelopment plan is adopted in June, the city and Canadian will begin the plans. The city of Canadian begin negotiating a redevelopment, and that agreement will set forth the rights and restrictions of Canadian, basically saying they have to construct this project in accordance with the redevelopment plan that would be in effect, and it would also allow the city to have oversight over that construction process and make sure that it's redeveloped in accordance with the plan. And ultimately, the property is constructed in a way where it's no longer blighted, it no longer would meet the criteria as an area needed redevelopment. The redevelopment plan sets forth, the redevelopment agreement would set forth a number of options for the city, such as the project schedule. It would impose the environmental requirements that the redeveloper would have to adhere to when they're constructing the project. And basically, it's a binding agreement that requires the project to be constructed as a represented city. Once that redevelopment agreement is in place, the builder would have to follow the project schedule to make sure that they hit the guidelines that are set forth. The project schedule is relatively detailed. It requires site plans to be submitted to the planning board by a certain date. It requires the planning board to hear the case by a certain date, and it requires the developer to commence construction by a certain date. So, as far as public approvals go, going forward, the council will have a public hearing on June 20th on this redevelopment plan. After that, once the redevelopment agreement, and assuming the ordinance is adopted, after that, the redevelopment agreement will come back to the council. They'll have to adopt a resolution to approve the terms of that agreement. And then the redeveloper will be required to obtain site plan approval. planning board, which again will allow for input on the site plans and what's actually built there. So there's a number of steps along the way that require further approvals from both this body and the planning board, and will allow for further public input with regard to the project. I think that's basically the timeline going forward. I can't provide specific dates because these approvals, sometimes get backed up and council needs more time to review. Sometimes the attorneys builder need more time to review documents. So I fortunately can't provide a specific date, but just to let you know that the hearing is June 20th on this redevelopment plan. Sometime thereafter, the redevelopment agreement will be considered. So that's the procedure going forward.
Thank you, Bill. Turn it over to Joseph now, if you want to share some of the work for all of the proposed plan. For your meeting, and I appreciate it.
Great, thank
Good to see
you.
you.
Thank you likewise. Good evening, my name is Joseph Lubinowski and I'm with Kate Mannion Homes. I've been with the company for over 30 years and I'm also a New Jersey licensed architect. I thank you for the opportunity tonight to present this project, and on behalf of the several of my colleagues that were not able to join us tonight, I'd like to express our company's gratitude to the very productive work relationship that we've developed with the city leaders and city professionals over the past couple of years as we progress with the conceptual development of this project. I won't repeat a lot of the background beyond noting that, as the mayor noted, that in early 22, we had approached the city to let them know that we were under contract to acquire the property that would be redeveloped in accordance with the Lambertville High School redevelopment plan. During that time, we had proposed modifications to the redevelopment plan to make the property compatible with our intended use. As such, an initial presentation to the city and its professionals, which was based on feedback that we had gotten from the city back in August 2022, resulted in us being designated as conditional redeveloper. That designation was subject to us preparing conceptual plans that was acceptable to the city and us entering into a redevelopment agreement to implement that plan. We then started preparing the conceptual plans. We had developed conceptual site plans as well as architectural plans that, as was mentioned by Mr. Sullivan, we had gone back and forth with input from the city, and resulted in what we consider to be fairly refined site plans, as well as architectural designs that are representative, very representative of what we intend to build. Based on the results of this work and with the city's input, proposed modifications to the redevelopment plan were offered and discussed with the city over that period, and it culminated in the proposed 2024 amended redevelopment plan for the Lambertville High School redevelopment area, introduced by the city council and is the subject of tonight's meeting. I'll provide a brief overview of the project, as I think many you're not aware, as Mr. Sullivan had mentioned, the project consists of up to 160 market rate homes, as well as 40 affordable rental units that are intended to assist the city in meeting its round 3 affordable housing obligations. Our project consists of 2 types of townhome. The first is a 3-story townhome, size approximately 2,300 square feet, with 4 bedroom and 2-car garage. That's an example of the typical elevation of that townhome is shown to my left. The second townhome that we'll be offering, Mr. Sullivan described correctly described as a stacked town. It's a three-story condominium living over living townhome consisting of two townhomes per module. The lower, each of them will have a dedicated private one-car garage. The lower home is a two-bedroom model at 1,600, a little over 1,600 square feet, and the upper home is a three-bedroom home at about 2,300 square feet. These consist of our market rate homes that Hovnanian will be offering. In addition, there will be affordable rentals that will be constructed in a single three-story building containing a mix of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom apartments. These will be offered for rent rates in accordance with the state requirements for very low, and affordable and moderate income household. We at Hovnanian are the overall redeveloper of the property for the installation of the improvements, construction and sale of all market rate homes. And we intend to partner with an affordable housing developer, the Michaels Organization, which specializes in building and maintaining affordable homes throughout New Jersey and the United States. The Michael Organization will maintain and operate the building, the affordable housing building, once it is completed. The overall development will involve the installation of new privately owned roads internal to the development, along with all of the necessary grading, underground utilities, sidewalk, parking, stormwater facilities, landscaping, and lighting consistent with the requirements contained in the amended redevelopment plan. In addition, based on the recently enacted enhanced stormwater regulation enforced by the Delaware Broward Canal Commission, careful attention will be paid to developing a fully compliant and safe drainage plan for the redevelopment area. This will include many of the DRCC's approved green infrastructure initiatives and infiltration options for accommodating stormwater runoff. Existing sanitary, sewer, and portable water facilities will be expanded and installed in service of the new development. As Mr. Sullivan noted, a protected perimeter buffer and conservation areas are going to be incorporated in the design of the community, which will be deed restricted and maintained in a natural state. All common elements of the community will be owned and maintained by the homeowners association. Governing documents prepared as part of the public offering statements for the community will include a master deed to require adequate maintenance of common elements and sufficient budget reserves for the repair and replacement of all those features over time. It is estimated that the total development value of this redevelopment initiative will exceed $90 million. That concludes my overview of the project, and I thank you again for the opportunity to present our proposed project to the community.
Thank you. Doug. Stormwater. I want to go on record as saying I don't think I ever was in a meeting with you without saying stormwater at least 6 times.
Thank you, Mayor. As noted when we first started, my name is Doug Orsino. I work for Gilmore and Associates. We are the city engineer. Myself, I am the city engineer. I am also the planning board engineer and the zoning board engineer. So with that said, I believe there was a good amount of history that was already stated about the project. And this is all of the upfront designs and work that needs to be completed in order to prepare the amended redevelopment plan and have that plan adopted. Engineering wise, there is some preliminary engineering that has taken place, one of which is the stormwater management system. And that is because when you have concept plans, which I've stated before, that's where we're at this point. With those concept plans, the developer still needs to be able to locate
all of the stormwater management features to ensure that there is ample room for those features to be installed. So looking at the plans, you will see there, I believe, currently 6 water quality basins proposed, as well as 1 large stormwater management basin to be installed. Now, with that said, the actual engineering of all of those systems has not taken place currently. However, once it's done, the developer will have to follow a number of guidelines and requirements. The city is currently going through an ordinance adoption, ordinance number 6-2024, which is to amend the zoning ordinance for Article 15, stormwater management. This is a requirement by the county and state for the city to update their current stormwater management so that it meets all of the state and federal regulations, actually meets or exceeds. There are sections that will exceed the federal. The city has the right to, they can't go less than what the state requirements are, but they can increase. And so there will be increases and or the same for the new ordinance. And so once that ordinance is adopted, then the developer will have to follow those requirements. As part of that, they will also have to, as noted, Joe, they will also have to follow the DRCC, Delaware American Canal Commission's requirements, since they are in review zone B of their area. And so the stormwater management system, just to give a little bit of background on what will have to be handled as part of the stormwater management design. The developer will have to, measures that will have to be met will be to provide for erosion control, which is always a concern. That is when, for anyone who might not understand what that is basically when the ground, once you remove the grass, you remove, let's say parking, any type of impervious coverage, you're exposing the earth. And so once it rains, then the soil can, the runoff that comes from that site will now contain soil. And they call it sediment-free runoff, and that is what we have to prevent from happening, so that way none of the properties downslope will be affected. Another item that will have to be controlled is what they call groundwater recharge. So the increase in volume that is created by the new impervious, which is impervious in any material that stormwater cannot, we'll say rain, cannot actually penetrate through. The additional volume of runoff that is created by that additional impervious, that has to be controlled on site and is to be recharged back into the ground. That helps with recharging the groundwater table. So that way wells up in that area will not dry up. And it also helps to prevent having a larger volume of water leaving the site and having the potential for flooding or any kind of adverse harm to downstream properties. And the last 2 items that will have to be controlled is the stormwater runoff quantity control. They call it quantity control, which is similar to what I was just saying, where the volume of water leaving the site. So the volume of water leaving the site after the development cannot exceed the volume of water that is leaving the site currently in the existing condition. So they have to control that, and that is what these basins are for. And lastly is water quality. And water quality is to ensure that contaminated waters do not leave the site and create any kind of adverse harm to, again, downstream properties or water courses that the runoff ultimately drains to. So the systems that will be installed, they will have to follow the green infrastructure best management practices, which is all guidelines that are produced by the state. There is what it's referred to as the BMP manual, and that is online. That is followed by all developers throughout the state. There is also what they call low impact development requirements. We'll try to meet them as much as physically possible. That relates to natural resources, which is one of the other stormwater features that has been currently analyzed by the developer is in order to remain as much as physically possible out of any steep slopes that exist on the site, out of to try to remain out of as much of the woodlands as possible. And so the layout that is in front of you today takes all of that into account. It reduces the steep slopes disturbance and the woodlands disturbance. So one of the next steps that will take place is the developer will, as long as the redevelopment plan is adopted and project moves forward, then the next steps, some of the next steps would be the developer would have to go out and he would have to do his due diligence testing to determine exactly where water recharge can take place throughout the site. All you know what the soils are working with and how the site itself to ensure that everything that is currently proposed in the concept plan will work. So that's one of the next steps that will take place. Then based on that, the actual full design of the stormwater management system, along with all of the other engineering aspects of the development, the roadways, the sidewalk, the retaining walls, and retaining walls and other features of the site. All of that will then be prepared designed, and then it will come in as a preliminary site plan submission to the planning board. And so it comes in as two phases. There's a preliminary and there's a final site plan submission. And both will be reviewed and heard by the planning board, has to be approved by the planning board. And then moving on from there.
Just one note about the stormwater control ordinance. So we take it very seriously at the council level. We have a subcommittee that's been working on that. Thank you to Councilwoman Kaminsky. Doug has been helping out Paul Cool on planning board chair, myself and Jeff Tittle, but working through that. That this will be a topic of conversation. I haven't told you guys this yet, but it'll be a topic of conversation for our next council meeting. We'll be discussing a couple of potential key other elements that may be included. So we are going to be looking at that and hopefully ready to move forward with it fairly soon. Doug and I have been talking about several things kind of over the last few days, and I haven't had a chance to update everybody about what those proposals are for that ordinance, but they will be forthcoming. Anybody have anything else that they want to? Good. We're going to move into the public comment period here. Just like to remind everybody that I would ask you to, unless you have mobility issues, please step up to the podium here, state your name and your address. You've got 3 minutes time. Cindy will kind of keep an eye on the time. I will ask that at 3 minutes that you please step away from the podium. If we have time enough, we can go around again, but I want to make sure that we have a good representation of people here in the room. We'll start off with only 6 or 7 people here, and then in fairness to all the 22 people online, 36 people online, we'll take some questions from them. So we'll kind of go back and forth. As I said, we've got about another hour and 20 minutes. We will have this same cast of characters, so to speak, at the second reading in June, and there will be information shared at the planning board meeting on June 5th. That's it.
Yes.
June 5th.
Planning board June 5th.
All right, so are there people in the room who have a question or a concern? To the
They should line up, don't you think, Mary?
yeah, why don't you line up with that? Cindy, let's keep an eye on the time, please. And I'm just gonna say that I'm really gonna on people to direct their questions to the professionals for the most part. These are people with expertise, and although we've all been very involved in this process, we want to make sure that everything that's said is absolutely correct. So go ahead.
Jeff Tittle, 33 Wilson Street. Someone who's been involved in these types of issues for over 50 years. My first planning board was going to be 50 years pretty soon. Anyway, I just want to start off and just say that I think 20 days is not enough time. This is a major project. It's the biggest project I think this town has ever seen. And to get it done and get a ordinance through in 20 days is just not enough time. I could sit here for 3 hours and do questions, but I only have 3 minutes. And the reason is because you're talking about one of the most environmentally sensitive sites in town, in an area that sits right above some of the worst flood damage that the city has ever seen. And whatever happens up there is going to exacerbate that situation and make it worse. You cannot mitigate for it. When you take down 1,400 trees, because that's what's up there, just on 10 acres, that's about an estimate up there. Each tree can hold up to 500 gallons of water. 3 inches of soil in a forested area can hold in a 10-acre area up to 1 million gallons. You're going to hear engineers talk about design guidelines and BMPs. BMPs do not work on steep slopes over 30%. And in best case scenario on flat land are about a 50%. Green infrastructure doesn't work on more than 1.5 inches rainfall. So you're going to hear a lot of numbers, but those numbers are numbers. They're on models. They're not real when you build on steep slopes and you knock down a lot of trees. Secondly, I haven't heard any talk about off-track improvements. You've got a narrow road going in there, and you're going to need emergency vehicles and school buses. You have 200 units. That's based on just average standards, about 500 people, probably about 80 school children, maybe more. You're talking about 50,000 gallons of sewage, 50,000 gallons of water. You're gonna have to build a water tank. Who's gonna pay for it? You're gonna widen that road. Who's gonna pay for it? You're gonna take land from people. Who's gonna pay for it? You're gonna have to put a traffic light on 179. Who's gonna pay for it? That's the problem when you look at, you're talking about 2,000 to 2,200 car trips a day. That's a lot of impact. And so I think we really need to take our time. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. We may be scaled down. We may look at some other sites in town to try to move some of the numbers around. I know you're in a difficult position because by me, they just built 14 luxury houses without one affordable. One site should have been an affordable housing site and it wasn't done. And that's true for other places in town. So now we have this in front of us. But what's it going to look like in the view shed? You can talk about how high are the retaining walls. You're cutting down a forest, you're building on a mountain, then you got 3-story buildings on top of it. How visible it's going to be. But my biggest concern, and you talk about conservation easement, that's all steep slope areas that, you're going to have to be a billy goat or a skier to use. What's that impact going to be? And my biggest concern for the people living down below, 3 minutes, will they need snorkel because, or their houses will they float away? Thank you.
This is not a high school production, this is not something, it's more important.
It's important.
And more time we spend clapping, distractions and allowing more, the less time we're gonna have to answer questions. So please, I understand that people are passionate about this, but I'm gonna ask really for silence while people are speaking in this room. It's important. Thank you.
Yes, so my address is 8 Grant Avenue and that's up at Common Hill. And I think the hill is gonna be really impacted by this. And I think the reason is because of the roadways. And I'm also wondering how, it's a very narrow road to Lambertville High School. So what are the plans for the roads, to bring people in, to take people out? And I wrote about it changing the character of Condon Hill also, which is really a very historic area in Lambertville. So I don't know if any thought has gone to, I'm sure thought has gone to it, but I don't know if there are any plans for roadways, where they would be, how they would impact the hill. It has to be okay.
So, yeah, I'm gonna take that as a question. So if you have a question, we'll do our best to answer it. So, some people are gonna just probably say things, but if you have a question, let us know what the question is. So it sounds like we have a question just about kind of traffic patterns and, Doug, I'm not sure if Doug should answer that. Or,
Yeah. I'm gonna start by saying all of those questions will be asked and will have to be answered as part of the planning board approval by traffic engineers and folks that specialize in the very issues that you're raising. We will have to comply, generally speaking, we will have to comply with the residential site improvement standards, which is commonly known as RSIS, which defines the width and the characteristics of the roadways, but we'll have a traffic engineer that can talk in a lot more detail about the impact that this community will have on the traffic.
Okay, so currently there's no firm plans for where the new roads would be or if they're.
At the conceptual design stage is where we're at now, that's our extent of the roadway configuration is going on the site.
Okay.
so yes, in fact, there's a grant, I always forget what the street is there. The paper street will be paved. Oriel, yes.
Freedom Road will be connected up to Allen Street, so the direct
Can you just point it out? Thanks.
Brett Scapinas with Dynamic Engineering Consultants, site engineer working with KOB. So we developed the site plan, the conceptual site plan you see online up here on the board, along with with the city. So roadway wise, if you look at the site plan, 179 is along the top here, so this is coming down the hill into town. And right here, this is Grant coming up the hill. So at the northern property boundary, Grant will be will be improved, repaved, set to the proper width, widened to meet RSIS within the current right of way, extended along to the southern point at that extension of Grant. That's where it becomes private. Okay, so there's existing right of way to where I'm pointing now. The rest of it is private roadways, interior of the site. When you come up Grant, and on your left or to the east, that's where Coriel sits. And so that Coriel will also be improved within the existing right of way, widened, paved, and brought to a dead end, essentially right at the West Amwell boundary. And here's Allen Street, so just a bit of it will be improved to connect into Allen as well.
Are we adding drainage to that as well?
The drainage, yes, drainage is being.
We know there will not right now.
Thanks for pointing that out.
I'm James Schweitzer, I live on Church Street at Franklin Street.
Please, everyone, quiet.
I live on Church Street, Franklin Street. I wanted to commend the city for the work they did this past summer on the stormwater repairs over there. There were some collapsed pipes and water in the street when it rains has completely been eliminated. They did a great job, so I want to thank you for that effort. My question was, you said that the stormwater runoff won't exceed the current from the site. How do you know what the runoff is from that site? And where will you, and how will you monitor it how will you monitor it on Franklin Street to see if it's gone up?
So when the stormwater management is designed, there's what they call pre-existing conditions and then the post-development conditions. So in the pre-existing conditions, the site has already been surveyed, all of the features have already been put on plans. And so the design engineer would look at all of those features. Every landmass has a different, what they call a CN value. So whether it's grass, whether it's woodlands or impervious, they all have different values to them. Taking all that into account, they come up with a runoff value for the pre-existing condition.
Okay.
And in different year storms too. It goes all the way up to the 100-year storm. Currently, the 100-year storm is the maximum storm that is analyzed as part of this. That's how the storm sewer systems have to be designed. They have to be designed to handle the pipes have to be designed to handle the 100-year storm and flow through it. But you take the pre-existing condition, and so you have your runoff values from there, and then they have to do the same thing with what they're proposing. And then compare the two in each of the year storms. They would then compare, and so the runoff from the post-development has to be less than the runoff from the pre-development in every year's storm.
Okay, well, we had 100-year storm about a week after I bought my house. And there was 6 feet of water on Swan Street and 4 feet of water on North Union and 3 feet of water on Franklin Street. So I'm afraid if we get another 100-year storm this year, which is supposed to be a record hurricane year or next year, we could end up with more water. So I don't know if there's, what would happen if we find out that the modeling was incorrect? And, being an engineer, I know that models don't always work. Is there escrow, or is everybody just gonna shrug and say, hey, I'm not
So
sure?
to answer that question, there is an escrow, yes, there is a maintenance bond that has to be posted at the completion of the project. So the developer would be responsible for everything during the construction itself. It's once the construction is complete, then there is a 2-year maintenance bond that has to be posted. So even after construction is complete, which for a development of this nature, it's gonna take 3 to 4 years at least
Yeah, okay.
for the development. And then there's an additional 2 years of monitoring it to make sure that everything's functioning correctly, and there is no adverse effects.
And that would be off-site effects, like if there's an unusual flood pattern on Swan Street that you could attribute to that development, would it be covered at that point?
So when the system is when the runoff is analyzed, it's actually not just analyzed as a whole. It's actually gonna be analyzed at each point, what they call point of interest, that the runoff is actually flowing to. So where it's being captured today, whether that be an inlet, a head wall, or if it's all just sheet flowing out to 179. Each of those areas individually have to be analyzed to ensure that they're not increasing the runoff to those, to one of those points.
Alright.
Now, a couple of quick items to note. A lot of the older infrastructure was not designed to the 100-year storm. They were designed for much lesser.
That one doesn't work.
They were designed, there we go. They were designed for lesser year storms. That's one of the problems that we've been finding that's contributes to flooding, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But one of the positives is in currently NOAA, which is the National Oceanic. NOAA has actually come out with new rainfall amounts that that the state is actively trying to adopt as their new requirements that designers are required to follow. We, as the city, have already asked one developer in which they did use the new NOAA rainfall amounts. We would ask that these developers would also follow the new rainfall amounts produced by NOAA. So that would increase the stormwater management system to be much larger to handle the larger rain events that are occurring.
Okay, so my last question was, you said before that there's gonna be every effort made to design the system to accommodate these projected rainfall totals. If push comes to shove, is the developer prepared to eliminate housing units to increase the water capacity there? Or are we just gonna say, we're gonna hold 90% of the water, we're not losing in housing units?
Well, I can't speak.
I know, I'm just saying, when push comes to shove, something's gotta give, right? You can't make the lot bigger, right? So that's kind of the city's responsibility to ride herd on 3 minutes, to make sure.
Okay, we're at 3 minutes.
Okay,
Do you have any comment on that?
I just will say in the 4 years that I've been in the city, I don't believe we have ever provided relief for any type of stormwater management.
okay, good, thank you.
My name is Mike Sariba. I live on 57 South Union Street. Just following up on some of the earlier comments focused on stormwater mitigation. I appreciate comments, Doug, that you made, but for transparency, my first question, just for the clarity of everybody in the room, could you point to where the high school building is relative to the stormwater basin?
The high school building
Is right there.
yeah.
Got it. Okay. So from a plan standpoint, that makes sense because it's downgrade the development. So the water is naturally going downgrade. My sincere concern is the control point of erosion and how that, based on a very steep site, would contribute to erosion. It could potentially handle stormwater runoff, I don't know, based looking on that size, it might have to be bigger, but I think it's going to exacerbate the problem of erosion. So what I would request in the future meetings and also to be made as public record are site sections that cut directly from the road all the way through the development and highlighting that basin so that you can have clarity for everybody in the room, not just a plan, but the steepness. Everybody's going to be able to visually see the steepness of the site and get a better idea. My second point is just a question is pertaining to, this must have been in part the study to date based on a geotech and soils report. And I'd ask the question, what year is that report? And is it the most current one available that you've been using? Just for my knowledge, if you didn't know that offhand.
Again, Brett Scapinet's Dynamic Engineering. Yeah, we, as part of the conceptual work, we did preliminary test borings on site to understand the soil profile, both to understand for stormwater as well as understand where rock is. Because obviously that's going to have a play with respect to cut and fill and working the soil on this site. So we did it for both reasons, and we used that preliminary analysis to get a general understanding as to where we needed to, how we can design the basins as shown. And as noted earlier, there are 6 basins in gray throughout. Those are the 6, along with the larger basin. There are also 3 underground basins as well. So it's really a total of 10 basins on the site. 6 water quality, 3 underground, and the 1 larger one. Okay. All working in conjunction to control stormwater. And that was essentially worked out based on the preliminary findings of that geotech.
Thank you. So my concluding comment would be, in addition to the site section, what I would recommend being shown for the purposes of transparency is an excerpt from the soils report showing exactly where the borings are. Because soils reports can have 5 boring locations or they can have 50. 50 is more accurate, 5 is loose. So it's just in the interest of transparency, everybody in the room better understands.
And I think actually the state is actually helping you with that question because they force us to actually provide, under the updated rules in the last few years, we're required to specifically test in the location of our basins. Now, we don't have those just yet. We did preliminary around, get a general idea, but when we come to the final design, we're gonna have specific borings in those basin locations. That will be part of the rule.
And that's prior to the 20-day delay meeting. Will that be available? 30 seconds.
Yeah, part of the site plan, and yeah, probably site plan. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. I'm just gonna note, after Julia Taylor, we're gonna go to folks online. So we've got 4 more people in the room, then we'll go to some people online. And then we'll go back to.
Hi there, Heather Bryan, 2 Hancock Street. I agree with my neighbors and their concerns about the storm water runoff downhill, but I live the hill. And I agree with 2 people who have already spoken about the traffic that will come up on our hill. Thank you, Jeff, for averaging it out. I came up with about 500 cars too, but not just residents. The consideration of delivery trucks, Amazon, Grubhub, all the other vehicles that'll be coming up have me concerned, because your proposal states that you will provide safe and efficient pedestrian and vehicular traffic circulation. When I read your proposal, it appears to only be within the site plan of your development, and I don't see anything written about what will happen outside your site plan. I'm concerned about pedestrians walking up and down Hancock Street, crossing Route 179. When I look at additional, like, we had that large development on the hill, Lambert Hill. And they have ample sidewalks and a stairwell for pedestrians to go in and out of town. And that is all outside of their development. Your proposed development, excuse me, is 1/3 larger than what exists on Lambert Hill. And I don't see any proposed access for people to go into town. And PS, from a personal note, I'm not sure how you're gonna widen the roads. My house is 66 inches, I measured it today, from the corner of my house to Hancock Street. I'm not quite sure how you're gonna widen the roads there or add sidewalks. So I'm looking forward to your traffic study. Thank you.
Thanks. I will note, and I don't know if anybody wants to comment on this particularly, but we did have extensive conversations about pedestrian access, and it's a difficult, don't know, Doug, do you want to take a minute to just talk to address that question or that concern?
Sure. So the developer and I did meet out on site. We were trying to determine if it was a efficient location to have public sidewalk that will leave the site and make it down to 179. Um, Unfortunately, it's one of those, it can never be an ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, it can never be an ADA compliant route, because as we all know, it's very steep going down Hancock Street in order to make it out to 179. That's pretty much where the most difficult section would be. We would be able to get the sidewalk down Grant, it was Hancock that becomes the issue. Also, the sides of Hancock there, it drops off on, at least on the ones on the north side, all the way down, it definitely drops off. The south side, there's several locations where it also has a pretty decent, drop to it. Now, one thing I will note that when the traffic study is performed, that is one thing that we will request. The planning board had recently requested that for some other applications. And so we would be requesting that here. When a traffic study takes place, it doesn't just analyze the site itself, it has to analyze, in all the intersections that the site will directly affect. Our office, we do have a traffic engineer that works for the city. And then so he will actually analyze or look at all the intersections that have the potential to receive traffic on the site. And all of those intersections will be provided to the developer, and that will have to be included in the traffic study. So it's not just the site itself, it's going to be the surrounding area when that traffic study takes place.
Can I add, to your study, the photograph of the car in my house on Christmas morning a few years ago? Our house has been hit by a car twice, and that's why I am really concerned about traffic.
My name's Sean Ellis. I live at 21 Belvedere Avenue, about a block away from, one property away from, the border of the development up there. I agree with the traffic concerns. I agree with the runoff and flood, floodwater management concerns. But I'm also concerned about what I read in the redevelopment plan about the city landfill up there. I don't know what the history of that is. I don't know if anyone here knows the history of that. But one thing that concerns me is that the city will not take any responsibility for mitigation of any hazards that the city had put there previously, and that falls on the developer to mitigate any hazardous materials that might be there, and that might leak into the groundwater and the wells of the folks that are around the up on the hill that aren't getting public water apparently, according to the plan. And I do know that there's a lot of rock, as was mentioned. Our house sits 3 feet above where it was supposed to, because we would have had the blast to go any deeper. I don't know if there's basements here or even just the disruption of something that great. I'm concerned about materials leaking into the groundwater, and I don't know what the recourse would be for if the water became tainted and unusable, undrinkable for folks up there. So that's my first question, in terms of health and safety. Can anyone tell me anything about that?
Well, like just your second question, I'll just stack them if that's okay. That's my, other people brought up my other points, so I think that's the concern. Okay. Who wants to handle the landfill, and kind of the phase 2 and sort of where we are? Yeah, maybe Bill.
Sure.
So the project as contemplated right now is set up in two phases. The first phase, the affordable component, the entire 40-unit affordable component will be required to be constructed. And there will also be 126 market rate townhome stacked townhome units as part of that first phase. The landfill is on the property where the second phase will go. Right now, it's private property. It's not owned by the city. The city has no remediation obligation. Closing a landfill is a significant regulatory process. It's expensive. And it's really the obligation of the property owner to do that. Right now, if the property owner doesn't do that, then the second phase of the project would not go forward. So, I mean, the first phase would go, all the affordable units, the city would be in compliance. That's that's a definite requirement under both this plan and the potential redevelopment agreement. But phase two would be contingent upon closing the landfill in accordance with DEP requirements. So that's the best answer I can provide.
So phase one mentioned to the west, and phase two is located here. This is the landfill. Landfill phase two.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And those, I don't know what the DEP requirements are for that, but does it include monitoring the water of, the basically the aquifers of all of the wells up in that area, and making sure that the water has not been polluted?
So that's not unfortunately not my area of expertise. I do have individuals.
I think so.
You want in?
Yeah, what I would say is we're in the process of conducting environmental investigations of soil as well as the groundwater. Obviously, one of the reasons we sort of bifurcated the site was because there was some initial indications that the landfill, closure of the landfill would take longer than otherwise would be available to us if we did not start phase one. So we're still working through that, and as part of the planning board and approvals process, all of that will have to be thoroughly vetted, and we will not be able to build on phase two if that landfill is not satisfactorily closed to DEP's local, state, and federal standards.
And it's a lot. I prefer not to get into now, but I can provide the mayor with some information on the requirements for landfill closures. You can make that available. It's not an easy answer, so that's why I'm not answering it fully right now.
Thank you.
How you doing? Steve Nels, was born and raised in Lambertville. My concerns, most of them have been talked about here today. My main one is the traffic, and I just wondered, since I live on Hancock Street, I'd like to know before, you can build the apartments and then decide on traffic patterns. I think we should have the traffic patterns before we build anything. I mean, you have to have trucking to get up on the hill if they're gonna do anything. I mean, Washington, you can't use Washington Street, that's just narrow street. Hancock Street's your best, but then how do you make the turn from Grant to Hancock without running into this lady's house? Yeah. So that's my main concern. Most of them have been, you had said. I just want to know when we're gonna have traffic patterns to know what's gonna happen.
So as far as the timeline goes, as I said, we'll set forth the project schedule in any redevelopment plan that gets approved. The traffic impact study would have to be done prior to the submission to the planning board. So the planning board will ultimately have to approve the project. So the traffic impact study would have to be ready for that hearing, and that all that information is made available. So before any construction takes place, that traffic.
Traffic stuff has to be taken care of.
Could you talk a little bit, Joe, about what you've done so far in terms of the street widths here, of looking at some of the street widening? to, you know, kind of lay a little groundwork of what you've been looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I'll let, Greg get into the detail as necessary, but, we looked at at a conceptual design level. All of the traffic patterns that would potentially be affected by this development, not only the traffic patterns, but also the pedestrian patterns and the encouragement of the city. We, as the engineer had pointed out, we walked, the site to see opportunities for pedestrian path down Hancock, Grant, and then Hancock. So we've spent a lot of time and effort exploring the impact, not only within the site itself, but beyond off-site impacts. The reality is we're still at the conceptual design stage. So other than identifying areas that say, hey, that's a bottleneck, we would have to do some improvement there. Other than identifying those areas, we intend to specifically address, design the solution, present that solution to the planning board, have it vetted by professional staff, and our expectation is the professional staff with our professional engineers will evaluate the design, because I agree with you, we don't want to ready fire sale. We want to put on paper before we build. And so that is a requirement of us, and that's what we will do.
Okay, thank you.
I have like to.
Hi, I'm Julia Taylor.
Hi, Julia, just before you do, I just wanted to say one other thing. You know, in terms of pedestrian access, we even spent some time looking at possibilities down through the woods and eventually discounted those because of slopes and disturbance and just the length that you would be required. You definitely get your 10,000 steps in. That's a walk through the woods down. Anyway, so we did look at a number of different pedestrian access possibilities. Please go ahead, Julia. Sorry.
Do I need to say who I am again?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was online before I came in. I just want to make sure I didn't miss something. Do you know how water service will be provided to the site?
I'll let our design engineer.
Yeah, we're planning on public water to the site. Exact way the water is getting there is not set yet. We're currently in discussion with Veolia, working with them on different alternatives, and there are different alternatives out there right now. Nothing has been set in place. So that's all I can really say.
Okay. I share many of the other speakers' environmental concerns, as I have since being on the Environmental Commission, first dealing with the site more than 10 years ago. But the thing I want to say now, just to save time, is that it is completely antithetical to New Jersey's affordable housing process to put a bunch of affordable units in one separate building.
Judy, we're gonna go to people online for
Okay, so we have one person.
one person with hands raised. If you're online and you have a question, please raise your little hand and
Right, so pause iPad Air, that's what you're showing us. Please go ahead and mute.
It's Paul Stevens, 39 Quarry. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So the the question I had that still remains after the talk about the traffic and stormwater management and even the water supply is the sewer supply for up there. It seems like a lot of units coming online rather at the same time as a lot. Has the LMUA been brought into the discussion process on what needs to be prepared for and that sort of thing? And if not, when would they be brought in?
do you have any other questions, Paul?
I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Brett?
Well, from a standpoint of sewer, we have taken a look. We know that there is sewer at the intersection essentially of Coriel and Grant that we'll be looking to tie into. The size of the line is large enough for a development such as this. So we anticipate that capacity is there. We have not, though, gone through a formal application process at this time.
With the LMUA.
LMUA.
Right. Okay, thank you. Anyone else online?
No one else with their hand.
Okay, please.
Judy Gleason, 86 North Union Street.
A number of the points that I was concerned about have already been raised, but I wanted to just identify a couple of things for emphasis. I think that Jeff made the point that 20 days is not enough. Coupled with the number of things tonight that have said, we're working on that, we're getting at this, we're at the design conceptual, we're this, which I understand, but 20 days and there's still information at the rawest way, we still don't have, number one, and number two, having been involved with as a neighbor resident with various development activities in this town over 20 years that I've lived here, I can say the planning board is too late to deal with some of this stuff that is being talked about tonight. By the time it's at the planning board, it's too late for some of these questions to be answered, understood, and vetted with the public and with the various elements that affect the public. So I would strongly encourage that we don't say, well, don't worry, it'll happen at the planning board, because it doesn't. And we know how the town has been developed lately, so we know it doesn't. Secondly, the standards that were talked about already, it's sort of a pre-existing condition kind of standard point. I don't know if we're counting the IDA standards, but it seems to me that's sort of a no-brainer to know. That's the place where you have to say, this is what you have to expect. This will happen. This did happen. So I can't tell by all of the ways in which we evaluate, but I am just encouraging that we don't forget what we know for a fact. And we don't forget what we know for a fact. Lambert Hill being a high up development and the city being here, I don't know whether all the things people said or thought are true, but I know that we have experience that we've lived through in a very real way, and I'm not sure that the design ideas and the standards that come from plugging in the algorithm and stuff will be satisfactory, especially to those parts of town that have already suffered through that stuff. So I would say 20 days isn't enough. The planning board and the bigger process, this is a big development. This is a really big development. I think more than 20 days and knowing things more than we're working on it might be an important step to take. And so
Once again, I'm gonna ask everyone to please refrain from clapping. If you're not gonna refrain from clapping, I would ask you to leave the room. Please, we will have decorum here. I understand your points of view, but we will have decorum in this room. Go ahead, Karen.
Carol DeSalvi, 63 South Union Street. I'm 81 years old. I've lived here 60 years. I've seen a lot of floods, a lot of storms. Nothing like Ida, because before we never had building like this on top of our hills. Macadam does not absorb water. I happened to be up there to see a friend of mine on High School Hill, and I saw the surveyor's stakes. All those big trees with established roots, which absorb the water, will probably be cut down. That's number one. Number two, they talked about having city water up there and city sewer. That is a rock that you're building on. How are you going to blast and not affect all the existing wells on that hill? That's the main question. And if this gets through, we'll have to hire more police, more city municipal workers to trash and to patrol the areas, which will be on the taxpayers. So let's see, that's it. And the flooding, that's about it. The flooding, everybody said that, and about the access and egress. It's very dangerous getting up there and getting off of that hill. Yeah.
Larry Inhofe, 500 Newport, Lambertville. We've talked about the 20 days, but actually the planning board meeting is June 5th. And we've talked about having the information for the planning board come back to you with a recommendation. That's their function, right?
It's not the site plan for
Only on your. So what's this, we've got a lot of things in process here. That we've talked about. Well, we'd like to see them, or we expect to see them in the plan that comes back to the council. But what's gonna go to the planning board? So they're gonna make a recommendation.
So, two more stops in plan, or if this goes forward, and it's, on June 5th, the planning board will review the pending redevelopment plan that was introduced by the council on May 16th.
Okay.
They'll review that to make sure that and the regulations that are set forth in there are consistent with the city's master plan. So that gets all there on June 5th. If the ordinance is adopted and then a redevelopment agreement is adopted, someone's required this project to go. This project, not the redevelopment plan, but site plan for the project, go back in front of the planning board for their approval. That's your time where I think most of the discussion's been about tonight, where they're going to have a traffic impact study, they're going to have specific plans for what the project is actually going to be. So it's later on, and I understand some of the frustration with, that you think that might be too late to process, but really, with the way the redevelopment law interconnects with the land use law, this is kind of the process that we have to follow, and the planning board is there for a reason. That site plan approval is required. It will be required under the redevelopment agreement. It's required under the redevelopment plan. It's required under the land use law. So that's a necessary step, and it's not too late. It's just where it falls in the timeline, and a lot of the information that you need to present to the planning board, they're not things that you can really put together without knowing that you're the redeveloper of the project and you're working towards a project. It's just not something that comes to play at this time. These are what's being approved now, the zoning regulations under this redevelopment plan and construction standards and the redevelopment standards under the redevelopment agreement. The planning board approval was other set of requirements, and that's just, it's later on in the process. We need to get to the moment to get to.
Are there zoning regulations that the zoning board would do any sort of variance? You mentioned.
No, it's not. So that's another thing, that this redevelopment plan is being drafted, so there's no need for variance.
Okay.
Everything has to be constructed in accordance with this plan. So when it goes to the planning, it would go to the planning board just for a regular site plan. They won't need zoning variance really when they get down.
I just wanted to emphasize what Jeff said, what Judy said, that 20 days doesn't seem like enough time for a citizen. The planning board will have documents out there for us to look at. And I used to be on the zoning board, and I know sometimes it was enough and sometimes it wasn't, and things move forward. In terms of things moving forward, your description of how we settled on the developer here was kind of like and we got a developer. Left me wondering, was it last man standing that was the developer? Was it the last man out of the room that was the developer? Could you be a little more clear about how we selected the developer? I don't mean that in any sort of way other than just transparency about the council met. I assume in closed session. Could you be a little more clear about what were the contenders? How did we eliminate, or how did we arrive at the developer?
I can't speak, and if anybody here can, before I was elected, but as I noted earlier, the first contact I had was in March, and I think, had you already gone into contract on that?
It was about the time that went into contract, just at about that time where we came to terms with the landowner. With a proposed plan at a given price, and that started the process. I don't know with what other developers the land seller had spoken to, but we had wound up settling at about that time to a contract.
I can say that my firm was involved prior to mayor's.
Oh, I got a 30-second left. Unlike farmers market, the city has no money in the game here. We're not involved in pricing or valuation or anything like that. Just there's been talk about that around town of, could the city in any way like
Who would love to put that on the back?
No, it's privately owned, Canadian controversies. I just did want to say, prior to the mayor's tenure, my firm was involved. I wasn't directly involved. There was another representative from my firm. And I do know that the city had been talking with other developers who would make propositions. They weren't as concrete as this, but they had explored, and for some reason they didn't progress. So
I think that was when there was an eminent domain, there was a possibility of eminent domain. I mean, I think the answer that's really clear and easy for folks is that it's a privately owned piece of property and Kay Hovnanian is negotiating with the owner of the property, so we're not involved in the transaction. I think that's the clear answer.
whoever was
Yeah.
successful in negotiating.
Right.
Please.
Okay. Hi, I'm Rosemary King, 83 Douglas Street. I would like to learn more about the relationship between the condo association and the affordable housing units. I understand the affordable housing units are going to be maintained by another corporation, and then the condo association would be maintaining its own. Will there be, I would hope they would have the same standards of care. I also think about that this is one neighborhood, and I wouldn't want to see a situation where the condo makes a playground and then the condo association calls the police to tell them that the kids from the affordable housing are trespassing on their playground, right? So these are just some issues I'd like to hear more about what that relationship is going to be like. My other question is separate, but do you want to hear the other?
Yeah.
I guess, it was referred to too, but I would just like to hear it when we talk about the volume of water for the calculations, such as for the ground recharge. Is that volume of water, the volume of water we had in 2021? Is that the amount that's being used to calculate?
All right, first question.
Yeah, I could try to address the first question. Our intent is to create a master association that includes all 200 of the homes, so that there is clear responsibility and there's clear benefit to all the residents. Now, there will be a separate association for the affordable housing component. Again, that will be privately managed, separately managed by Michael's organization. We wouldn't expect, for example, that our townhome homeowners to be responsible to replace the parts and pieces of the affordable building for long-term maintenance purposes, although there could be some infrastructure overlap. But our goal is to have sort of a master association in charge of all 200 homes, and then a separate HOA strictly for the affordable.
Joe, what happens if Michael's, I have one question related to that. What happens if Michael's goes belly up in 5 years? Is that the city's responsibility then? I mean, or does Covanian pick up because the people you guys delegated that to went out of business?
I wouldn't consider that a delegation in terms of operation of the affordable building. We are not constructing or managing or maintaining the affordable building. It is part of this overall project. But in terms of the long-term viability of the Michael's organization or any other company that would potentially step in to manage that property, we don't anticipate having a role in that.
So the answer would be if Michael's goes out of business, it becomes the city's problem. So I think that's what I'm trying to ask.
There's going to be two separate redevelopment agreements. One is going to pertain to report lab. So we're going to have to, we will put some restrictions in place, and I can share a copy of the redevelopment agreement is going to look like the council. So we have an idea of what is in there, but it accounts for that scenario. So you can take a look at that when
Can I, to address your question about access to amenities, it is actually in the affordable housing regulations. This is considered one inclusionary development. And it is in the regulations that occupants of the affordable units are required to have equal access to all the amenities as the occupants of the market rate units. So that's why the affordable organization is part of the master association, and the tenants have equal access as the owners of the market rate units do to all the amenities on the property. Do they have a voice in the homeowners association?
I would imagine that the organization would. I don't know exactly how that's structured. That's probably more a Bill question, but yes, I would imagine so.
Like renters would have a voice. Sorry, like renters would have a
Yeah.
voice in the
I
association.
would certainly, the renters may have a tenants association that would have a voice. There'd be some organization representing the tenants that would have a voice in the association, yes. And just in terms of Michael's generally, I will say that Michael's is a very well-respected tax credit and affordable housing developer with projects all over New Jersey and the region. So it's always possible that they'll go out of business, but I would say it's highly, it's not, they are not a fly-by-night operation we would have to worry about.
Okay, but even just like, road repavings on the private roads, is that gonna have to be negotiated every time between the two associations? I mean, I live on a different hill, but the hills are rough on roads.
I would say the vast majority of the private roads will be owned and maintained by the homeowners association the master homeowners association that we will be established. They will be responsible to maintain the roads and all common infrastructure.
These are just some things I want to say. Okay, can I get the second question?
Yes. So to answer your second question, with that storm in 2021, I didn't do a calculation specifically for the city, but other locations, which it does differ depending on the location. But all said and done, that storm equated to roughly around a thousand year storm. And currently the state, currently the state only requires to have it designed for a 100-year storm. So that is the requirement that the developer has to abide by. Then it doesn't mean that the planning board could not have some modification to that, but the state requirement is only the 100-year storm. Storms such as the hurricane is, in theory, only supposed to occur every 1,000 years. Unfortunately, and I have done studies on this, in the last, we'll say 10 years, because of weather patterns in this area have shifted and changed. We have had some of the most extreme weather in recorded history within the last 10 years. That's not something that we can necessarily, unfortunately, control. But that's so hopefully answer your question, no, take into account the full volume of what occurred in 2021.
Okay, at minimum, I would say as a resident, I'd like to see a model of what would happen if we had that same storm again.
Can jump in there just for a second?
Yes, of course.
There's been a lot of conversation about this 20 days with the planning board, but mayor sits on the planning board and you're the planning board engineer, is when an application comes to the planning board. There are certain requirements that they provide the planning board with in order for them to get even a temporary situation going. So the number of reports and studies that the applicant will bring to the planning board, well, includes many of what studies and information the public wants to have. So unless they go through, there's a checklist of the applicant's got to answer all dozens of questions and reports from various state and local agencies to comply with their rules before they approve this rule, any project. So this seems to be just a little cross talking about, what in 20 days is the planning board going to see? They're going to see this amendment to the housing plan, basically.
What's important about that, and Bill mentioned this before. What we're doing is, the redevelopment plan is really it's a combination of master plan and ordinance, so it's a zoning, right? It's got exceptionally high level design requirements you can't normally do. And then we spent a lot of time doing like this conceptual work to get a really good sense, as Bill said, of what the requirements are, the bulk standards, the heights, the number of units, where roads can go. It's a higher level ordinance, but it's not a site plan yet. And they can't do a site plan and proceed as a redeveloper until we have the ordinance in place. And that's really what we're getting at here, that this is an ordinance we're developing here with as much information as we could derive from K Hovnanian and their engineers, trying to figure out what happens on the site technically that they can do. And then feeding that back to us to get into the ordinance, so we have as much control over this in terms of the design as possible. Once they have zoning, then they can proceed once all the requirements are met and the agreements have been signed. And they will have to do all of that technical studies and prove to the planning board and to everybody who comes to see it that technically they can do what they say they can do. If they show up and they say, well, listen, we didn't know there was rock here, now we have to move this, and we have to do this, and now we have to increase our basin sizes or something. That's on them, right? That's gonna happen. Doesn't matter really what happens, they're still gonna have to produce pretty affordable units, right? But there's this gap, so in order for them to get to that stage, we have to get to the redevelopment plan adoption stage. Such that they can do the agreements and then actually do those detailed studies and give us that information. And give it to the planning board so they can decide if they've met the requirements or not.
Thank you for explaining the process a little clearer for everybody.
So just to clarify, because I'm feeling like based on this last set of conversation, there's maybe a disconnect between what we're trying to accomplish, around what we're trying to accomplish. And what I just heard you say, Michael, was, if I can reword it, is that we're at the early stages, right? And this is the beginning. So and I think people, when they talk about 20 days, they see the date of the second reading is June 20th, which is 20 days. And only calendar days, not business days. So it's a little alarming, and I don't blame them for having that concern. But we're really just getting this kicked off, and that there will be adjustments and revisions based on the materials that have to be produced to planning board going forward. Is that an accurate restatement?
There may be. We can't tell what those technical studies are gonna reveal at this point. It could be that everything they're showing conceptually can be built exactly where it is in very much the same configuration.
Well, the other thing I'm hearing is a lot of questions have been asked rather. Some have been answered. I don't want to shortchange them, but there are a lot of really significant questions. And I think the public would like to know, what's that cycle? And I don't know who answers this, but what's that cycle for getting that feedback back into the public domain so that they can digest it and say, yeah, that makes sense, and maybe have, I don't know, maybe we have another round. I don't know what that answer is, but I'd kind of like to understand, I think the public would like to understand how we're going to assimilate the feedback we're hearing tonight into what ultimately gets delivered in terms of people moving into houses. So it's a long process, right? It's a long, convoluted process.
Yeah. I think I agree with the 20 days that we're hearing. I think that relates to when the public hearing is for the redevelopment plan ordinance. Certainly, it's not 20 days from now, we're going to be approving 200 units of at the site. That's not gonna happen. I mean, it's just like it's clear. 20 days is just the time when the zoning regulations that were setting forth in the redevelopment plan amendment will be up for adoption and public hearing adopted by the council. I think a lot of the question, I think we're all going to, after getting the feedback, we're all going to take a look at the redevelopment plan for sure. Here is addressed there to the extent that it can be. But a lot of the questions, more significant questions we're hearing regarding roadway improvements, off-track improvements. I think a lot of that is going to be part of the site plan, which is later down the line. So like Michael said, we need we need these regulations in place so that Canadian has. They have rules that they have to follow, and then they will design their project, their site plan in accordance with these rules. And I think that's the best way to describe it. For example, if these regulations go into place and we reach an agreement with Canadian that gets approved by the council, you know, a typical approach that 90 days from now, the redeveloper would have to submit a site plan application to the planning board. So it's a, you know, it's gonna take them that long to put all this information together. It's gonna be a very, you know, expensive process for them because there's going to be a lot of work that goes into that information as well. So they need to know what they're working on in order to get to that phase. And, you know, it usually takes, it takes a couple of months after everything is in place for them to get to the point where they can present something to the planning board, that the board that is specific enough and detailed enough to consider that's like one of the final step.
So we're, excuse me,
Well, I also want to make sure that in the next 15 minutes, we get to the last couple of people who've been very patient. So did you?
go ahead. Well, I was just gonna say, so we're laying out the basic fundamental requirements so that the project can move forward through a very lengthy process. That's what we're saying.
And public, lengthy.
Right.
Public.
And public, yeah,
Public.
public, okay. And just to add to that is that the planning board on June 5th, just to be clear, is a great opportunity to come because the planning board looks at the ordinance and makes a recommendation. Now, the planning board needs to, you know, want or input because then they're gonna look at the ordinance and come back and they make a recommendation back to us, correct, Bill? So if the planning board, you know, I'm just saying, come to the planning board meeting, I guess, in a short way, because the planning board looks at the ordinance too, and then says, well, is that enough? Or is this, you know, and then they make a recommendation back to us. And it's a very complicated process to understand, but just to, you know, be clear as to be able to help, you know, as to input, you know, because we want to talk about it, you know, and you hear a lot, you know. You learn a lot, and I'm on the planning board too, but I want to hear, you know, you want to hear it then too, because then we'll be looking at the ordinance, and that will be the discussion. So come to the planning board too, but. Okay, we're done.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me interrupt. You too, right?
That's no problem. That's fine. I'm Susan Bergamo. I've lived in Lambertville about 44 years now, so I'm a local. And I want to share my experience about living on North Union Street for many years in my wonderful old house. And even though I was in the flood zone, I never got a teaspoon of water in my basement until Lambert Hill. And, you know, no one's going to convince me that that development didn't start making my basement flood to the point where, I mean, I got out before Ida, but the water came all the way up to the ceiling, and prior to that, I had not even gotten a drop of water in my basement. So I think that you can use all the models that you want to use, but the models are not always realistic. And I think that some of these effects could be absolutely catastrophic to so many townspeople, so many of us. And I just think there should be some mechanism in place for, first of all, I think all of the points and all the questions that were brought up, there are so many things that we don't know about this. We need to know more about this. And second of all, who's going to be held responsible if the models really were a little off and somebody lost their life, or somebody lost their vehicle, or somebody lost their house? Who's going to be responsible for that? We are relying on all of you to protect us. We are relying on you to ask really hard questions and and use the right models, like in other words, what's happening with climate change and using the most recent thing from Ida, not outdated thing. This has so many potential problems, so many, that it's extremely alarming. And I realize that it's a process, and I really appreciate you listening to our concerns, the suggestion to come to the planning board meetings to, because you guys want input, I think is a really good one. I'm a little afraid, it's really easy to feel powerless, and it's really easy to feel like no matter what we say, it's a done deal. I think some people, probably many people already feel that way. But I just have so many concerns, and there are so many unanswered questions, and I'm worried that this could cause some catastrophes, this situation. So I guess I just wanted to say that, and I know that it's a tense environment right now, but I just think there's just so much more that needs to be dealt with, and we need really reassurances that if things go awry, that somebody's going to be held accountable after the fact. Because builders are often, I'm going to say a stereotype, but there's this stereotype of they build, they're gone, they're out of business, and everything gets all screwed up, and the little people end up paying the price. So we need to be really careful about that. Question I have is, who owns the apartments, the affordable apartments? Who's gonna own them?
They're gonna be owned by the Michaels organization. They will be the owner manager of that property.
Okay,
And residents will be rental residents, but ultimately the owner of that building will be Michaels or a successor organization.
and Michaels is gonna be working in coordination with the Association of the Townhouses?
Well, there'll be a master homeowners association, and the Michaels organization will have a vote in that master organization.
I do have to say, I have concerns about the people in the affordable housing being sequestered to one little spot there.
Susan?
Separate from the nice, really beautiful townhomes. That really concerns me a lot. So I'm saying that's not considered to be the best model.
I'm gonna ask you to wind down because you're past 3 minutes and we have a couple of other people behind you.
Okay, but anyway, I think that should be rethought. I don't know why it couldn't have been more integrated. I don't know why it has to be like that. So I have concerns about that.
Yeah, I would just say from a planning purpose, for planning purposes, we looked at the location of that, we looked at the location of the affordable housing from the very beginning of the project, because in an ideal scenario, you do want to have the affordable homes integrated.
Yeah.
And so the fact that in terms of the layout of the project, the best solution was thought to be a single building that, quite frankly, accelerates the number of affordable homes that the city would benefit from. We look at that location, even though it's a single building, it is at the entry of the community, so it's prominently located. We don't think it's something that is hidden or is tucked away. And ultimately, at this stage, we look at that as the best location.
The only thing I want to say is that we all know that separate is never doable.
I'm just gonna note that because of the time, we're gonna allow for 2 more speakers and then we will end, as I said, at 9 o'clock. So please go ahead.
I'll be quick.
Thank you.
I'm Lisa Kathy Williams. I live at 84 Coriel Street. I've been in Lambertville for over 30 years. I've been in my current house for over 25. Hurricane Floyd changed my part of town. I wasn't at this house in 1999 when we got hit by Hurricane Floyd. I was on Ferry Street, but it was a disaster. We can talk about Irene, we can talk about Ida. Hurricane Floyd was a nightmare. After that happened, as everybody who was in town knows, the public school was destroyed. FEMA came in and built a floodgate around the public school. After that happened, all the houses in my neighborhood started to flood. We bought our house from Paul Franz. He moved in 76, never once got flooded, including Hurricane Floyd. We've been flooded twice, and I'm talking 20 feet of water in our basement in less than 15 minutes. This floodgate is pushing all the water to all the neighborhoods around the firehouse and around the grammar school. I hope you guys are going to take that into consideration. Thank you.
I'm Linda Stryker from One Waterford Court. I have a lot of the same feelings of many people that have spoke here. I'm new to Lambertville. I've lived here 2 years. My sister is a longtime resident and I moved here to be close to her. Part of the reason I moved here was because it was a small town. And I know that people are talking about the density of this development. And so I'd like to say 2 things about that. The ordinance scares us because you are approving a development to increasing it to 200 units, which is a huge density on the top of that mountain. And once you prove that, the developer looks at that as a done deal and works towards maintaining the 200 units. I know the zoning board is in place to help police that, but that's frightening to many people. That's my first point. My second point is a development of this size increases the population by at least 11%. Think of it in terms of that. It's like we have 4,000 people or just over 4,000 people, according to Wikipedia. I might be wrong, but that's 11% of reduced parking in an already congested downtown zone. There's so many things, so I'll stop there. But one of the last points I want to make is I live in Woodcrest, and since I've moved in, I've watched the homeowners association spend over $100,000 dealing with ash borer disease. And replanting trees, working with the Sourland Conservancy to plant trees so we can help our neighbors downstream so we absorb our water. Has anybody looked at the trees that you're proudly pointing to and checked? Are there ash borer trees? Is this going to be a huge maintenance problem like we have in our development? And so that is the other question I have. Have the trees been examined that you're all relying on?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. You wanna?
I would just.
The survey was done, but with respect to the species of trees, each one, they've not been identified yet. But the area and trees have been surveyed.
Okay, we have time for one last speaker, so please.
It's Dave Carter, 255 Sunshine Avenue in Lambert. 2 quick points. And this is a question. Detail wise, the 2024 redevelopment plan increased 61 units or 44%. The 200 is a number I think that really concerns people. So if that can be trimmed down, I think it answers a lot of questions. The other thing, and this goes to what happens beyond the 100-year storm. Okay, are we going to see more as a result of a 100-year or the development during a 200-year storm? And I think the answer to that is yes. And what can we do about it? Thank you very much.
All right, well, last lady, Larry, I'm gonna ask, this is gonna be our last week.
I've had Rebecca Barnett with her hand.
Oh, okay, so we'll have hear your comment and then Rebecca, and then we're done.
I live on Hancock Street. Camille Lee. I've lived on Hancock Street. I walk down that hill every day into town. I'm appalled that no one is talking about the pedestrian access. They put this development in, first of all, people who live up there, this is a modest hill. It's quiet, there's wildlife, everybody's happy. 200 more people up there, they don't even know where they're gonna exit. Oh, and don't forget, I've lived through developments being built before. The blasting, the concrete trucks, the dump trucks, and they will go on whatever street they can up there. It will completely change the quality of life on that hill. It's absurd. It's just absurd. So we're not going to be able to walk into town anymore? That's what I'm hearing. So all of that area has been ignored by Lambertville pretty much. Nobody really cares, but it's pretty much been ignored. The lots are weird. They're grandfathered in like tiny lots and stuff, and it's whatever it is. And this is the reward that the people up there get. It's this. Really? It's gonna be lights, it's gonna be traffic, and we who live behind there will get nothing out of it. We won't be able to walk into town, the cars are gonna be constant. Unless they make the roads so that it's impossible to turn up into the hill. To leave that development, they will be constantly all over the hill. Going fast, running over the kids playing in the street, running over the pets. There's no sidewalks up there. Where are we gonna walk with 500 cars streaming all over the place? They don't care. They don't care. And the people up there are of modest incomes and they can't hire an attorney to represent them. So there are laws involved in developing things, and that's what they are concerned with. If it falls within the law, they can do it. But everything else doesn't matter to them. They don't care about the people up there. Only care about the $90 million. Affordable housing, word salad, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter.
Failure.
And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And who do we-
Rebecca Burnett.
Okay.
Rebecca, can you go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question or make your comment?
Sure.
Rebecca? Rebecca, if you're commenting, we can't hear you. I see that you're unmuted. You need to go on.
Okay, Rebecca, you can give me a call tomorrow if you want, so I can hopefully answer whatever question you have. I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. Certainly, as we've noted already, the planning board meeting is June 5th. Second reading and public hearing of the ordinance is June 20th. As always, I'm in City Hall, so if you have questions, feel free to stop in or give me a call and I'll do my best to answer them for you. May I have a motion to adjourn, please?
No move, second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's like, stop. Sure. I don't guess they are, they want to. So it's like, government, right? That's the thing.
Stop, there's a difference in Tracy, since like, sure, yeah. Sharing the chicken liver, like, and this one, thank you for. Practice. Game like over here, and. Seems like, yeah, it's just how, like, everyone had a new concern.